Okay, welcome back, and this is part 2 of the selective transaction history for DEAMS and BQ. We're going to move on to the elephant in the room here, and that is the general ledger, the DEAMS general ledger. And we're going to be explaining how Excel works in these videos here. Now we are going to have some videos that kind of get into the general ledger a little more, documents, how they flow through, but bottom line, in terms of using these tools and integrating the data, documents on a line item basis in the general ledger for DEAMS lose their identity. So when a document goes from, let's say, a purchase order and then a payment or outlay happens, that next record, that next batch number that's associated with the payment loses its identity. So if you were tracking it through reference 4 or reference 5 and then it pays out, and then you'll see maybe the payment number or the who we paid in reference 1. Well, you look for that in reference 1 to see, okay, it paid, I see it paid, but then in reference 4 and 5 you lose the identification of the document number or the purchase order that it came from. So it's very confusing whenever you go through to sort and you're doing an audit or you're just doing daily activities. It's incredibly difficult if you're just trying to look at the general ledger. Also for your ALO, working with DFAS, trying to understand how best to get the job done, basically. So in this case, the logic in the formulas that we're using here, I am not in this case going to step through every single one of these, because what we're having to do, especially with the general ledger, because there's so many entries, we're having to do some things to basically improve performance and not lose quality. The first thing I want you to pay attention to here is the data that we're using now. Invoice by LOA. I'm going to jump to this report here, invoice by LOA. Now there's no added columns that we're doing to this at all. Alright, but what we are going to do is a sort, and it's because when you work with sorted data, or that you can ensure that you're working with sorted data, the lookup functions in Excel work unbelievably more quickly. So for example, just a quick peek behind the scenes, I'm going to control down arrow 7631. 7,631 entries. If we do exact match lookups, whether it's index and match or VLOOKUPs, here's what potentially will happen. It's going to scan through every single one of those 7,600 to look for a match. Now where that becomes a bottleneck in terms of calculation is here. This is an entire years of the DEAMS, so control down arrow 35,161. So let's do just some really super rough math and go equals 35,161 times 7,600. Alright, right, because every single line here I've got to go look at this other table to go return a value. So that's this number, whatever that is. What is it? 267 million calculations, potentially. Maybe find them faster or slower. So what we do, and if you were to use that, it is fairly slow, but it will do it. What we do is use an approximate match, and we have to sort the data to use an approximate match. So we put this in the formulas here. We're going to do invoice, PO distribution ID, and PO number, and then we're going to sort them in this order so that when we do the approximate lookup, it's going to return what we want, because it's going to find the first instance or the way that it looks at that. And if you wanted to research that more, go ahead, Google it in terms of approximate match or approximate lookup value. But that's why we're going to sort it. Invoice number, PO distribution, PO. Let me see if I can do this while we're here, so if I can remember. So invoice number, PO distribution ID, and PO number, and then I think we wanted to do largest to smallest and Z to A in this case. We spent a lot of time and a lot of months trying to figure out how to make this best work. You can see now this one points up, this one points down, and then all the way to the right this one points down as well. So did I get that right? Invoice number, PO distribution ID, PO number. Looks like I did. And the cool thing here is that with a table, it's going to remember that. It's just going to remember, hey, you sorted it, and every time I refresh the data, it's sorted. So took a little time to explain that one, but it's very important because some of these formulas that we are just not going to dive into are set up so that they work on sorted data. A lot of times if you have a product or somebody has a database like a Discover Viewer or these guys, they get paid money to think through these things and make them work so that when you download it, it has that, or they do table joins or something like this. So with the free tools that we have at a wing level, this is how we make this happen and make the user experience not so bad you're waiting there all day for it to recalculate. Okay, so requisition number, also I do sort this. It is sorted in the template. If you were to want to do an approximate match on your requisition number, but this here is 600 records. So if we do that same math over here and goes equals 35,000 times 600, 21 million. In reality, that's not that bad. You're not going to see a huge difference. So we don't put it in the template that way, but you can if you're very comfortable with how your products work when you get them back to your home station. Go ahead and do those to kind of explore it. All right, so into these helper columns, so we've sorted our two supporting data sets, and I guess let me backtrack real quick. Invoice by LOA, that invoice number, see how we've got an invoice number, that's in the general ledger. PO voucher number, it's important, it's not in the general ledger unless the invoice and the voucher are the exact same thing, which they are sometimes. So this table helps us pull in that lost information whenever purchase orders pay out and outlay into paying people, and so this is going to help us bring in that information. And you'll see when we create our pivot tables, our reports, you're going to see how we bring that in and how we can put it all in one nice snapshot for you. So it really is nice. It's tremendous help. Commitment to obligation. Here's another one where we've got our requisitions, and our requisitions, whenever they become purchase orders or they fund purchase orders, they go away in terms of the general ledger, and so we kind of use that as well to pull in depending on the type of document number. We do give you access to a matrix that the DEAMS team provided months and months ago that says if it's this number, then it's in this reference column, but whenever this document moves to this type of thing, it moves to another reference. So all that jumbled up stuff, that's what this logic does for some of these formulas. So let's go ahead and get started. Please review the videos that we have on the front end of the DEAMS General Ledger series if you want further explanation as to how they operate a little more. But at the end of the day, it just takes time. It takes getting in and spending time and having those use cases, and the light bulb comes on. So we're just going to get you to the point where the tool works for you, and then eventually as you continue to work through it, you're going to gain a comfort level. So let's go ahead and get started. These are going to be my added helper columns, so I'm going to Control C in the DEAMS STH, and then I'm going to, as we've done before, paste special transpose. My table expands dynamically for me. That is so cool that we have that just right in Excel. Definitely take advantage of that when you can. Alright, first thing, formulas. So we've seen this before in the previous videos. If you haven't, go back to the status of funds videos. We talked through a little more on these. Index and match, because we are looking from the right to the left in this case for our fund code. Copy and paste that in. Boom. Nice thing about DEAMS here, we talked about, remember those hashtag ref errors? The DEAMS reports will come out with the same column headings every time, so we don't have to worry about as in the CRIS queries where a field heading may be different. These will always be consistent, so that is nice. Reference 1. So reference 1, this logic here, this if statement is going to come in here, and let me go ahead and paste it. Let me paste it in there, and then I'll go and explain a little bit. See, reference 1, if it says requisition, give me requisition. If so on and so forth, GLAC 46 or 45, then say target load. Let me show you what I mean. Reference 1. Let's go to reference 1 in the DEAMS data. Reference 1 is here. See how we said it loses its identity, or reference 4 and 5? I've got a null, I've got reference 4, I've got reference 5. If we put this in a pivot table, we're going to start to see all these values that don't mean anything. They don't mean anything to us at all. The only parts of that reference 1 that do mean things, see that complete pack, these are our actual vendors that we're paying. So the compromise that we've gotten to here, in reference 1, you do see REQ, you'll see PO, and then you'll see a bunch of vendor names. So what we've done here, the only compromise we lose in this is that we're not going to show all of these vendors' full names in the pivot table. We're just going to say, hey, this is an outlay, something like that. Okay, and then you can reference that if you want to, but that's the one compromise, so just be aware of in when we look at reference 1 instead of the old one. But now we have this. This is what we have to work with. So in terms of reporting, that is a huge deal to filter, do a one-page report, and have immediate intuitive understanding of what's going on with the execution of your fund. So this is how we did reference 1, and we do use that in the pivots. Pateo, we've kind of gone through that, but again, the more descriptive you get with the Pateo in your Pateo descriptions, the easier and better your reports can be. So let me go ahead and copy this in here. Same idea, we're pulling in meaningful data elements, and with DEAMS it's nice because the field headings don't change, and they kind of trim it for us. So what we found is that the DEAMS data, we don't have to worry about the trim so much. Pateo pivot display only. Now what is this? So when we go to SFIS, they have a BLIN, a budget line item number, I believe, unless I'm saying that incorrectly. That BLIN for, let's say, Air National Guard, that BLIN contains your BPAC, what we used to think is a BPAC, right? 521, 542 for MILPER. But then it also contains AG-SAG information in terms of validating your lines of accounting. So instead of writing a bunch of code, we're trying to make this streamlined across the Air Force, really. So for our reporting purposes, what we do is do another Pateo where we put in, here's the difference, we use this only for reporting display. We put the BLIN right in there so you can see the entire BLIN. So it kind of expands that Pateo out to like more of a full Pateo, I guess, if you want to say it that way. So you've got your 0101, all those filler zeros, and then you've got your AG-SAG information. But if you go down into there and find some MILPER, so here you've got the full BLIN. So you're getting a bigger picture, and we think that's just more valuable to you when you're looking at it over the execution of an entire program. Okay, so that's why we do that. We feel it's worth the extra memory and a little bit of a lag in calculation. You will not notice it until the end of the year, but it's there. So subcommodity, again, if you wanted to have some of those other Pateo definitions in there, please feel free to go in and add in commodity or resource center or something if you don't want to use your slicers for your RCCC or whatever. But we put subcommodity because, again, it's kind of the metadata behind your commodities. You see how it kind of blinked there? We talked about it in the status of funds, how this VLOOKUP, we know it's not the most efficient in terms of formula calculation speed, but what it's going to do is give us, hey, define your Pateo, or it's going to give us the definition that we have. So we wanted to make sure that we tied everything together, and it says what you selected, or it says please define this. Alright, so that's that subcommodity that we can use for filtering and reporting. Our next formula is going to be stage of accounting. So this is essentially pulling in or giving our GLAC the meaning of what a balance ID used to be, or a stage of accounting. So whether it's called a GLAC or whether it's called a balance ID, it is a stage of accounting, and it means something to us in the budget world. So VLOOKUP, if you can see this here, it says 1. That means it's doing an approximate match, which is faster, And so the reason why I like to do this, and I'll elaborate a little bit and enter here. The reason why I like to do this is because in my data tables, in my GLAC table, these are not going to change. And if they do, then there's going to be a lot of emails or something, because this is a standard way of defining transactions. So you see how all these are one, two, how many do I have? 6, 7. Do I have 7 that are in the obligation GLACs? And this is that T ledger when one's posting credits and debits. So we're going to tell it that all of these GLACs, they mean obligation 4801, because that's exactly what they mean. 4801, or it's an obligation stage that's being affected. So we roll them up like that to make it more meaningful, and I sort this list smallest to largest. So a sorted list allows me to do an approximate match lookup, which is way faster. It's called a binary search, and it just has a more efficient way of getting to the answer. So I know it's sorted, I know it's a complete list, so I'm going to use that approximate match lookup on that. And then we use this just like we used our bids when we do our reporting, so that we can see it and it's much more meaningful. Next one is going to be target adjustment. We're using a column that comes in, or a field that comes in from the general ledger naturally, that says budgetary. So if it says, if the source is budget, then give me reference 4, and reference 4 is going to give us our document number for our target loads. And that's a nice report to be able to have. Reference your target loads and what you did over time. What did you do? Did you do it all right? Did you make a mistake when I need to drill into the weeds? That's a nice functionality. We're going to have to stop this video and come back to it because there's so much here, but for time and for size of the video, we're going to stop and pick this back up. So see you then.